Hey everyone, George Weber here, gWebberArts, and we're here in the cave. And today we're doing sort of a tool review of sorts. So let's just jump right into it and take a look, right? Okay, so today's CRAP-TASTIC tool is this plane. It also has a baby brother, a little trim plane. And these are made by Buck Brothers, and they are sold at Home Depot. Now, the story of these planes is I was wandering around Home Depot, and I had seen them sitting there, and I was like, I've needed a plane in the past, so I thought for, $23, somewhere around there, $24 for the pair. Okay, sure, why not? And they sat around my toolbox for a while, and I had used the trim plane a couple of times, and it's not great, but I could adjust it well enough that it worked for what I was doing well enough that I figured, oh, okay, for $10 that was all right. But that's not the plane we're really talking about today. This plane has not been tuned up, and that's the story we're talking about here, is tuning up planes and why this is a crap-tastic tool. So we're going to get on with that, and we're going to put this on the side. Okay, so I was watching an old video from 2017, give or take, that Cody of Wrangler Star, that's his YouTube channel, Wrangler Star, had bought a $20 bench plane on Amazon, and was in the process of tuning it up to see if it could be a serviceable hand plane, right? Because it's cheap, and pretty much any plane you buy, it doesn't matter if it's $20 or $100 or $200, it's going to need some tuning, but it becomes this curve of how much tuning. So anyways, I'm going to try to link to his video in my description, because he not only talks about how to tune up the plane in terms of getting the sole flat, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit on this piece of crap. He also talks about blade adjustment and so forth and so on, and getting the plane to work the way it's supposed to. And it's a good little video. The plane he worked on was a Stanley SB4, a number 4 bench plane. This is not a bench plane. If it was, it would have a big handle back here. This is the process that he used to tune up the plane that he was working on, and it's the same process for pretty much any plane. Step 1, obviously, is to disassemble the plane. We take out this gizmo, and we take out the blade, and you're going to need a piece of glass. A thicker one than this would be better. And the idea behind that is the glass is flat. Now, once you got your glass, you're going to need sandpaper, wet or dry sandpaper. Don't use regular sandpaper, use wet or dry. And you're going to wet the surface of the glass a little bit. A little spray bottle will do the job. and lay the sandpaper down, and that'll help hold the sandpaper in place. Then you spray the sandpaper itself with some water, put this plane down, and you start rubbing back and forth. And by doing this, what eventually starts to happen is you get areas along the sole that wind up looking polished. Now, I've already done this one quite a bit, and that's part of the story here. But what happens is you'll start to notice that as you do that, there's going to wind up being spots that are shiny and spots that still have this dull grinder mark look to it, and you'll be able to tell the difference. And in Cody's video, he started out with 320, which I thought was a little light, but you know, I figured, okay, it's a starting point. And he worked on his probably for, you know, granted he did a little quickie camera work thing between the shots, and you know, about 30 minutes give or take, and cleaned it off. And he had some pretty good toe and heel shine and some edge shine. So I was following that process. And, you know, I'm using the 320 and I'm working away. And after about half an hour, flipped it over, cleaned it off. And I've barely got any shine along the toe, just a couple of corners, and a little more on the heel, the tiniest amount along the outer edges. And I'm like, okay, so this thing must be like cupped like pretty badly. Now, the process at best can take 4, maybe 5 hours to go through the whole process and get everything tuned up. At the rate I was going, it would have taken me a week at 320 grit sandpaper. So I upped the ante to, you know, I just figured, okay, let's go crazy. And I went to 100 grit sandpaper. And I'm working. And after maybe 45 minutes or so, I don't know, I'm constantly wiping this thing down and, you know, checking it as I'm going. 45 minutes in, I have this big, massive area that's untouched. And I'm thinking, this thing is so far from being flat that even at 100 grit, this is going to take way too long. So I up the ante again, and I up the ante again, and by the time I was actually getting some progress, I was working on 40 grit sandpaper, pressing as hard as I could practically without breaking the glass, and I was finally starting to make some progress. Once the 40 grit had gotten it down pretty well, I went after it with some 60 grit. Anyways, after about 2.5, 3 hours, give or take, that's my result. A reasonably flat base that still, in this area here, has a low point. And I can see it. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but I can see the difference in the color of the metal. I can see the grinder marks. They're there. It's not bad. It's close. But 3 hours with extremely heavy grit sandpaper just to get close to flat. And now I have to go back and, you know, work with 100 and 220 and 320 and maybe even go down to 400 to get it to be smooth and get all the sanding marks out now. And if it was only that, that might be, I consider almost reasonable. Almost. Yeah, you know, it's just not flat. And a lot of them aren't. As you get into more expensive planes, usually the quality is better and you'll only need to spend a couple of hours instead of, you know, to get it really good and flat, as opposed to 3 hours just to get close. But it didn't end there. Now, let's see if I can illustrate this as well as I can. If I put that, you can see that front part of the throat is pretty straight looking as I get closer to the square. And you should be able to tell, even as bad as this camera work is. But if I do the same thing on this back throat, you should be able to see, let's see if I can get the light better, that isn't even close to being square. It's got this big step in it right along here. It's like it's way up here and then it drops down and goes over that way, and the whole thing's crooked and cockeyed and everything else. So I'm going to have to take a file and try to square that up, at least a little bit. And it doesn't end there. The blade has grinder marks in it that are so heavy that I can literally run my fingernail back and forth on this and file my fingernail on the grinder marks. If I run my fingernail along the sharp edge, I can feel in certain areas those grinder marks like saw teeth. Needless to say, this blade is not going to give you clean shavings no matter what you do, the way it is. So it needs to be worked on as well and flattened out and polished and then sharpened. Then comes number four actually, of our horrifying flaws with this plane. When you're putting a blade in a plane, you have adjustments from left to right, turning it like this. And the idea is to get the plane blade pretty straight, or maybe slightly angled, depending on what you're doing, to get nice clean shavings, right? And if the sole of the plane, the base, is flat and the blade is flat, when you plane your wood, it'll be flat, right? Well, this, down inside here, way down in here, and I just really can't point to it well, but down in here, where the throat is and where the blade sits against, there's a bunch of metal humps. They're like lumps of metal. And what that means is when you put the blade in there, you want it flat like that, but those metal humps are going to cause it to lift like this. Now, turning the blade this way is one thing, but once you lift that blade like this, no matter how flat that sole is, with that blade sitting up cockeyed like that, you're never going to get a flat cut. It's always going to cut one side heavier than the other side, and you're going to wind up with this cockeyed bevel in your wood, which is what you're not trying to have. So, the bottom line is that this is without question a CRAP-TASTIC tool, which for $13.95, you're going to have to put an enormous amount of work in for it to even be close to serviceable as a tool. And it's just not worth it. So, CRAP-TASTIC tool of the day. Again, if you want to learn more about getting your plane set up, getting it flat, getting the blade adjusted, and getting it to shave nicely, I'm going to try to put this link down in my description. But go find Wrangler Star. He's got a nice little video on it. You just have to hunt it down. And I need to find myself a better plane. I've been looking around at the estate sales because I buy cheap tools. Cheap in the sense of they're used, so they're, not expensive. Not cheap as in brand usually. This was a mistake. Estate sales, flea markets, garage sales, but I just haven't found anything good in terms of a plane as of yet. They've either been really cheap junk like this, or they're just too far gone. If you guys happen to know of a plane that's good and can be tuned up reasonably easily for, let's say, $40, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Or if you have comments about this video, by all means, shoot me some comments. Meanwhile, if you think this video helped you out at all, give it a thumbs up. I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel. I need more subscribers, just in general. Click that notification bell so you know when I put out a new video. I don't do it like every day like some people do, but I put out some interesting videos, I think, about tools and projects I'm working on and my artwork that I do. So maybe you'll enjoy it. So anyways, that's everything for this video, I think. Remember, Home Depot, Buck Brothers, CRAP-TASTIC, absolute CRAP-TASTIC plane. Don't buy that thing. All right, over and out. See you later.